Sure. Now, just as an introduction, my name's Kris. I'm one of the founding members of the Typhoons. It sounds fancy, it just means I was one of the first people to turn up. And I currently hold the position of Sponsorship and Club Development Officer at the club. For those of you that haven't come across us so far, the Typhoons are Lancashire's first inclusive rugby club. We formed 4 years ago at Preston Grasshoppers, and at our very first session, 5 of us turned up. It was the brainchild of, I think, a couple of pints with both our founding member Lawrence Howard and a couple of the chaps from the RFU. They were talking about how there'd been a bit of a rise in recent years of the number of inclusive clubs across the country. The IGR, the International Gay Rugby Organisation, was founded in 1995, and not an awful lot happened for a number of years, but in the last sort of decade, there's been a growth in the number of inclusive clubs popping up around the country. But one of the things that was noticed is that these were broadly in city areas, so places like London, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, that had large inclusive populations on their doorstep. And there was a bit of a question as to whether you could do something like that in rural Lancashire. I turned up on that first day in January in 2018, not because I had some burning passion for rugby. In fact, quite the opposite. I was somebody who would put my hand up and say that I had an active dislike of team sports. Something had happened in my life. I'd just actually recently lost my mum to a very short battle with cancer that knocked me sideways. and in myself knew that I needed to do something to break myself out of the rut that I'd found myself in. And so I saw the advert for this new inclusive club coming to Lancashire, and something just resonated with me. And I remember turning up to that first session on a cold January morning, sat in a car park, and I rang my best friend. You know, I'm a grown adult. I rang my best friend and said, "Adam, I don't think I can do this. I'm sat outside of Preston Grasshoppers. The car park is full. I'm terrified of stepping through that front door and being instantly judged with everything that I was always terrified of when I was in secondary school. Why am I even here? Why am I even trying to walk through the doors of a rugby club? Should we just go to yours and watch a Harry Potter marathon?" I think was my exact words. And he said, "No, stay there. I'm on my way. We're going to do this." and I turned up to that first session and walked through the doors of Preston Grasshoppers, who I've got to say are a remarkably inclusive club in their own rights. We're incredibly welcoming, and we ran around and had some fun. And I made some connections with some people there at the club that, well, when I went home, I was buzzing. I was absolutely thrilled with what I thought I'd stumbled upon. And I was really excited to go back the following week. Somewhere in those formative weeks, I seemed to be landed with the role of organising the club's marketing, doing something around sponsorship, and I inherited a whole bunch of roles that I wasn't really expecting, because I wasn't really sure if I enjoyed rugby to start with. But there I was, and I remember the conversations really early doors. You know, 5 of us turned up. That isn't a rugby team. Is this sort of thing going to work in Lancashire? And if it is going to work, what do we have to do that's different to make sure that we capture people's imaginations? Because this isn't sustainable with just a handful of us, no matter how enjoyable it is. We had no money, we had no experience of running a sports club, let alone a rugby club. So what is it that was going to make us do something different to everybody else out there? And so we started with the word, well, what does inclusive actually mean? You know, when we looked at our peer clubs, what inclusive meant was gay men's rugby. Let's be honest, that's ultimately what it was. And it was very successful in those areas. But if we were being honest and saying what cross-section of society identifies both a gay male and being interested in rugby at this specific point in time, in Lancashire, in sort of travelling distance of Preston Grasshoppers, what are the chances? And we said, well, to be honest, we just don't think that's going to be the case. So inclusive needs to mean a hell of a lot more as far as we're concerned right now. So actually, it needed to encompass every strand of diversity. And for us, we had to sort of figure out, well, what does that mean in the context of a rugby club? You know, are we looking at, you know, social economic background? Are we looking at race? Are we looking at age? Are we looking at ability? Are we looking at, there's a whole number of things. And for us, we agreed inclusive had to mean inclusive. And that, and Kris, I know in your presentation, you talked about understanding what your values are. And for us, we had to live and breathe those values. It wasn't enough that we could just say that there are values and make the easy decision all the time. So, when we had less than a few £100s in our bank account, one of our first members says, I'd love to come and play rugby, but I can't afford a pair of rugby boots. The decision was, well, do we put our hands in our pocket and we buy the rugby boots for them? Or do we say, oh, well, I'm very sorry, I know that's our values, but you're just going to have to find a way to buy. Well, no, we made the tough decision. We said, well, you know what, we'll buy the boots. And hopefully this person will go out and they'll champion our club and they'll bring in 10 other members who will be paying a membership. And we made tough decision after tough decision, knowing it was the right thing to do. Now, I'm really pleased to say that we grew beyond our 5 members, and we're touching on near 100 members just 4 years on. So the growth has been phenomenal, and it's been across every strand of diversity. So we have people who identify as LGBTQ plus. A third of our members are straight, and they've come to our club going, there's something about a traditional rugby club that I'm not finding, but there's a sense of community, there's a sense of cohesion here that for them resonates. And I've done a whole range of radio interviews and interviews with sort of journalist students, and the first question they always ask is there a need in this day and age for inclusive rugby? And it's such a valid question, because like I said before, Preston Grasshoppers has been unbelievably welcoming to us. In fact, they've sent some of their first team players to train with our guys. We feel very much as part of the Preston Grasshoppers family, even though ourselves were not part of that club. So they are a very inclusive club. But if I was to ask myself, would I have ever gone and joined Preston Grasshoppers? The answer, if I was being honest, is probably no. And it's nothing to do with what they're doing as a club or not doing. It was more about the anxieties that I had about my background and my sexuality and how I sort of transposed that into rugby than it was ever about those. And it's funny because I told my story about why I joined rugby, but actually when I speak to the other members, there's 90 plus other stories that are very similar to mine about having some sort of baggage, let's call it, that people are bringing along with them, why they hadn't engaged with traditional sports clubs, but why they'd chosen to turn up on a rainy Thursday or Friday evening and train with us. And the nice thing is, people have come to train with us and then gone, actually, I want to go and try out for Preston Grasshoppers or one of the other rugby clubs near me as well. So it's provided that stepping stone into what I'll call mainstream community sports clubs. And that's something that we sort of welcome as well. Now, that early committee, we were very lucky. We had individuals who came from a range of, I'm going to call them professional backgrounds. So we had experience in coming up with business plans, in understanding Cobb's Learning Circle. Let's make our mistakes and make them quick because we've no idea what we're doing here. But let's be really honest with ourselves and let's be really honest with our members about that fact. So transparency was absolutely key. So especially in those early days, we had open committee meetings where members could just come along, and it wasn't enough that we could tell them the outcome of what we're talking. Let's see that. Let's let them see our working out. And if our motives are always honest and follow our values, then they'll never sort of hang us for the decisions that we make. They might not agree with them, but they'll understand how we got there. And that really stood us in good stead. But also, it showed us really early on that dialogue with members had to be two-way. And that was really easy when there were 10 of us. We'd just go to the pub and have a bit of a chat. But as the club's grown, we've tried to evolve those mechanisms to allow us to have two-way communication. And it was really interesting, Kris, on the slide where you're saying about the different channels that clubs use. For us, we've always tried to maintain channels that allow members to speak back to us and to be really honest about that, because that allows us to take that feedback and instigate that change really rapidly. And the people, and we've been very lucky that our committee's been relatively stable. It's grown, and we've had very little transition over our 4 years. We have had some, and we've encouraged that. But what that's meant is that people have built in their experience over the years, and people have got to know them as touchstones at the club, and that these are individuals that will make things happen. So we are, I think, terrified of standing still, actually, because the world is a changing place, and so is the idea of diversity. And our aim, our stated aim, really is to provide that stepping stone into sport for people who might not have otherwise felt like sport was for them. And so that dialogue is important for us to evolve who we are and what our identity is. And so we started as a rugby union club, and we understood from our members that a number of them were picking up injuries because of the contact nature of rugby. Some of them, because of age, were not wanting to do contact for an awful lot longer. Some of them wanted to work on fitness, and rugby, like most sports, is seasonal. So we had our off season, and taking all that on board, we said, well, how about we start a touch rugby side? And this was a great way for our injured players to sort of rehab without the contact element, older players to stay involved again without the contact side. And we created it because of the reasons of existing members. But actually what we found was, unlike rugby union, where you can't have sort of mixed sex contact sport, touch rugby allowed us to have mixed male-female teams. And so actually the membership of our touch team grew much more from outside the club than it did from inside the club. And rather than just sort of being the second fiddle to the union team, it's actually now grown to be as large as our union team, and brings in almost a completely different set of diversity with it. That's brilliant. But then I think as clubs grow, and I think we'll all find this as clubs grow, when there are first teams, second teams, third teams, you've got to balance the offering so that no one feels like everyone's just subsidising the first team to go out and have all the fun. And I've spoken to peers in other rugby clubs that have had those challenges. And for us, we've always wanted to deliver value, and that has to come through a conversation with our members about what is it they're trying to get out of this. Now, my role is now primarily engaging with sponsors, and I can't tell you how hard it was in those early days. I must have emailed, I'm not even exaggerating, 200 plus local companies. Hi, we're a new local inclusive club. There are 5 of us, but there will be more, and we're trying to be role models in the community, and this is what we're hoping to do. And I must have got a mixture of 200, well, either very polite no's or just was ignored altogether. And I realized actually after that, after many evenings of sobbing into my inbox, that probably wasn't the right approach. And so actually very similar to one of your slides, Kris, attitudes, values, beliefs. This is rural Lancashire. Who are these companies that are there's no commercial value in a club of that size for these people to engage with. There's no package of promotion that I can put together to go, our 10 Twitter followers will boost your audience. It just wasn't going to happen. So I started to follow organizations, small businesses in our area that spoke to similar values about supporting local, that were family run, that were involved in other community initiatives. And we just started a conversation with them. And we said, look, actually, we don't want any money off you. What we want to do is figure out how we can work with you to your benefit. And we engaged with businesses that we thought that over time, as our club grew, there might be a mutually beneficial arrangement between us. And that took a lot of time, but again, making those decisions early has allowed us to build some really honest, open relationships. And I think we're very different to a lot of certainly other inclusive rugby clubs, because they've gone down the, you can have the gold membership, gold sponsorship package or the silver sponsorship package, and we'll promote you this. And we don't offer any of that. My contractual arrangement with our sponsors is you get your logo on the kit, and that is that. But as a collective of individuals, there's a gratitude that we have for your buy-in to supporting something that really matters to us. And for that, you will get 100 people championing your business, not because they're contractually obliged to, but because they bloody well want to, because they understand what you're sacrificing, what you're giving up to allow us to do the things that we do and to do them well. And that's fostered such a great relationship with our stakeholders, with our sponsors in particular. They come down and they cheer us on at matches. They turn up to pride events with us and wave flags and join in, and they're very much a part of our family. And so as a club, we've built a massive resilience, because we've not just done the easy thing or tried to copy what everyone else has done, but to go, well, what sits well with us and what energizes us to get up in the morning and to talk about X business or Y business. And And that's worked really well for us, but really making sure that there's a good fit between attitudes, views and beliefs, between what we're looking to do and what those other organisations were looking to do. Looking towards the future, we are looking at other sections to our club. So we talked about diversity meaning everything, and we've listened to some of our members, and 5 years have gone on nearly now since we started, and some of our members are getting to a point now where they're saying, well, I don't think I can take the bangs and the bumps of the contact rugby. So we're looking, and I don't think I'm breaking too many secrets here at the club, but otherwise you're the first. It's a breaking news. We're looking at opening up a walk-in rugby team that allows people again to engage, and we're looking more towards that age diversity. Looking again towards the future, we as a club have been picked to host the Northern Finals event for the UK IGR. So there'll be about 400 rugby players descending on Preston Grasshoppers. Wow. For a finals, and that really matters to us, because not only does it establish us as a credible club in the inclusive world, but allows us to put something back to our host club. They have been incredibly generous. Lots of other inclusive clubs haven't had that welcome from their host teams. In fact, they've had quite hostile receptions in some cases. But for us to be able to make sure that we're putting money behind their bar, that we're using their clubhouse, and sort of supporting their commerciality is really important to us, and we take every opportunity to sort of champion them as well. And then this year, our team's having its first international rugby event, and so we're taking our club over to Ottawa in Canada, COVID permitting, in August. So the club is growing, and has always got its eye on the future. And then, one of the things that I think is really important, not just in terms of the sporting achievement, but communicating and celebrating that achievement internally, so people can have a sense of, well, they've got a sense of trust and sort of ownership through the committee, but then also ownership of the successes of the club as well. So we've been really looking. In 2019, we won the Spar's People Podium Awards, which is a sort of a local bit of recognition from the guys behind Spar. But then the club has also just found out that we've made it through to the finals of the National Diversity Awards, which is it's an enormous achievement really for a club that has no paid staff, is run only by volunteers, and the organisation, I think the smallest organisation we're up against has 10 paid staff, and it for a club of our size to just even be at the finals is a massive step, because we didn't even know if we could keep the doors open this time 3 years ago. So a lot of what you said in at sort of the start of this, Kris, rings very true for us, and with decisions that we made right at the start of our club, and we've been very lucky. There are some amazing community groups in our locality that have been very generous with their advice, very generous with their support, and we have learned as a club what matters to us and what are the basis of our decision making that hopefully sets the club up. And we're in this now, so we had a relatively stable committee. One of our recent decisions is that, well, if the club can't survive without us, we've not done a good job. So we need to make sure that we set up the club to be sustainable. And so what we did this year, we've created a number of committee roles for people who are really interested in being on a committee but have no experience of volunteering or in committee roles. So the idea is that they can come along to the committee meetings. They've got a say just like anybody else, but they're developmental in the way that they're structured, and so that they can get that experience, so that this year they might have that developmental seat, but next year they might apply for one of the more substantive posts. And the idea that they get to understand the values of the club, they get to understand the trajectory and the direction, so that there's a stable platform for them to build on. And so we're trying to create the structures that build a successful club. And it was really interesting as well about did you mention code of conduct, or sort of similar within the club about values? And one of the things that people roll their eyes when I say it in our club, but I came across a quote a few years ago that I absolutely live by when it comes to our club, which is it's a quote by D. Hock, and it's simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to complex and intelligent behaviour. Complex rules and regulations give rise to simple and stupid behaviour. And that's to say that there's got to be a balance. You can put in all of the structures and all of the processes, but sometimes that just creates a dot to dot style mentality if done wrong. You know, if you have those principles, if you have those values in place, it allows people to have a conversation and get to the right answer, even if it is a little bit fractious, you know, on the way to getting there. And that to us has been, I think, vital in how our team has formed and grown. I can which one for hours. If you want me to cover anything else, please do say. If you've got any questions, please ask. Otherwise, I'll zip it.